This hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Multilateral International Development, Multilateral Institutions, and International Economic, Energy, and Environmental Policy will come to order. Today, the subcommittee will hold a hearing to examine an important question. What challenges and opportunities exist for advancing U.S. interests in the United Nations system? Now, to fully assess this matter, we will hear testimony from two panels of well-qualified individuals, one comprised of executive branch officials and the other comprised of individuals from the private sector. With their help, I anticipate a thought-provoking examination of whether or not United States foreign policy objectives are being fulfilled within the UN framework, and I look forward to hearing their testimony shortly. I will add that we expect votes in the Senate to be called in just moments, and so what I will be doing as chairman of this committee is reading my opening remarks here. I'll ask the ranking member to do the same, and then each of our witnesses, I'll have you read briefly your opening remarks. At that point, we're likely to recess, go vote, and return into session. So as we look at the news today and we see the range of conflicts around the world, one thing is clear. Those conflicts are increasingly complex and have impacts that extend beyond their region. Iran continues to extend its tentacles throughout the Middle East, sowing instability and conflict wherever it goes. Russia no longer even attempts to hide its aspirations to influence foreign elections around the globe, including here in the United States. China's unfair trading policies and practices affects every one of its trading partners. The common thread with each of these challenges is they will be more easily resolved if we work together with international partners and allies. Our role in multilateral organizations is one that continues to be debated among government officials, think tanks, and academics. And while this debate is very important, we cannot lose sight of the changing landscape at the United Nations and other multilateral organizations, where the United States and our allies are at risk of ceding moral and policy ground to those who do not share our conviction for standards and norms. Today, Chinese nationals are at the helm of 4 UN agencies. Americans are only at the head of 3. One of the key issues we hope to explore in today's hearing is the implications for senior Communist Party members leading the United Nations in these agencies. The Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Telecommunications Union, the International Civil Aviation Administration, and the Industrial Development Organization. What types of policies will these Communist Party members implement? Who will they bring in to join the ranks of the UN staff? Will they represent the interests of the United Nations and its members or those of the Communist Party of China? And how should we advance our interests, which we believe to be universal, given this backdrop? President Trump has repeatedly said that other countries need to step up and do more to shoulder the weight of addressing the major crises around the world. As China's economy continues to grow and it exerts greater influence in the world, it's natural that it would seek more positions of power within the UN system. But as it does so, it's incumbent upon the United States and our allies to ensure China supports and defends universal values rather than its own domestic political agenda. Human rights, free speech, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, due process, and access to information are just a few of the values that are essential elements of the UN Charter and its goal to maintain international peace and security. We need look no further than Xinjiang or Hong Kong to have serious concerns about China's lack of respect for fundamental human rights. We should be very concerned about how the United Nations gives a platform to countries like Cuba, Venezuela, and China to talk about human rights. The UN itself publishes reports citing these and other members of the Human Rights Council as countries that retaliate against their own citizens for defending human rights. We should be similarly concerned about Russia's role at the United Nations and its willingness to exercise its veto power to protect Assad, Maduro, and other autocratic leaders. Spending time on the Council is not reform these bad actors, but rather given them a larger mouthpiece to share their misguided view of what is considered a human right. There is no issue more controversial and divisive in the UN context than Israel. Each year, the UN takes up a disproportionate number of unbalanced resolutions that assign blame to Israel for perpetuating unrest in the Middle East. These resolutions do not include references to Hamas, a known terror organization. Further, fellow UN member countries have resisted U.S. efforts to draw any attention to Hamas activities in any form. We look forward to our witnesses' statements on this complex issue and examining how the United Nations can play a more productive role in mediating and resolving conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere. Finally, I feel it's necessary to again note why this subcommittee and this hearing are important. The United States remains the largest donor to the United Nations, paying 22% of the regular budget and 25% for peacekeeping operations. In 2017, the United States was assessed $3.5 billion by the UN and volunteered an additional $7 billion in funds. Given these enormous sums of funds, it is essential that we as members of Congress keep a watchful eye on how these funds are being used and ensure they're going toward issues that reflect our values and our priorities. All that being said, I would like to recognize my distinguished ranking member for his comments, Senator Merkley.